Let me start by saying hello to all of you watching today. Whether you are a United States citizen who has filed an I-130 petition for a family member, a green card holder doing the same, or perhaps you are the beneficiary overseas or here in the States waiting for that approval notice to arrive, I know that many of you have recently seen headlines or social media posts talking about something called a new biometric speed-up rule for family petitions. And I imagine some of you might be feeling anxious or confused about what this actually means for your case. My goal today is not to scare you or to add to the noise that is already out there, but rather to sit down with you, take a breath together, and explain this calmly and truthfully, so that you can understand what is really happening and how it may or may not affect your specific situation. Before we go any further, I want to mention that everything I share with you today is for informational and educational purposes only. I am not your attorney, and this video does not create any attorney-client relationship between us. Immigration law is complex, and every single case has its own unique facts and circumstances, so if you have specific questions about your petition or your family member's case, I always encourage you to consult with a qualified immigration attorney who can review your documents and give you personalized advice. That being said, I believe it is important for people to have access to clear and accurate information, and that is exactly what I hope to provide for you here today. So let's talk about this so-called biometric speed-up rule that has been making the rounds online. The first thing I want you to understand is that the way this is being presented on social media and in some news outlets is often exaggerated or taken out of context. People see the word warning in a title, or they hear that something new is happening, and immediately their minds go to the worst possible scenario. They start thinking that their case is going to be denied, or that everything is being delayed indefinitely, or that the entire system is collapsing. I want to tell you right now, for the majority of you watching this video, that is simply not the case. What we are actually dealing with here is a procedural update, not a catastrophic policy change, and understanding the difference between those two things is absolutely critical. Let me explain what is actually going on. In recent months, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which we call USCIS, has been working on ways to streamline certain parts of the immigration process. And one of the areas they have been focusing on is biometric collection for family-based petitions, specifically I-130 petitions. Now, if you have filed an I-130 before, or if you are familiar with the process, you know that biometrics typically refer to fingerprints, photographs, and sometimes a signature that USCIS uses to conduct background checks and verify identity. For a long time, the way this worked was that the petitioner, meaning the U.S. citizen, or green card holder filing the petition, would submit their forms and supporting documents, and then at some point during the process, the beneficiary, meaning the person being sponsored, would be called in for biometrics if and when it was deemed necessary by USCIS. What has changed, or what is being updated, is that USCIS is now working on a system where biometrics can be requested earlier in the process for certain applicants, and in some cases, they are using biometrics that were already collected in previous applications, if those biometrics are still valid and on file. The idea behind this is to speed things up by getting background checks done sooner rather than later, which in theory could reduce overall processing times and allow cases to move forward more efficiently. On the surface, this sounds like a good thing, and in many ways it is. However, the reason people are calling this a warning or expressing concern is because any time there is a change in procedure, there is a transition period where things can feel a little chaotic or unpredictable, and that uncertainty makes people nervous. Here is what I want you to understand. This update does not mean that your I-130 petition is suddenly at risk of being denied. It does not mean that USCIS is implementing some kind of new scrutiny, or that they are looking for reasons to reject cases. What it does mean is that you might receive a biometric appointment notice sooner than you would have in the past, or you might see your case move through certain stages in a different order than what you were expecting, based on what you read online or what your friends or family experienced a year or two ago. For some people, this might actually result in faster approvals, which is obviously a positive thing. For others, it might not make much of a difference at all, because their cases were already moving along at a normal pace. And yes, for a small number of people, there might be some temporary delays, as USCIS works out the kinks in this new system, but those delays are not permanent denials, and they are not a sign that something is fundamentally wrong with your case. I also want to address the difference between a delay and a denial, because I think this is something that causes a lot of unnecessary panic in the immigration community. A delay simply means that your case is taking longer than you hoped, or longer than the published processing times suggest. Delays can happen for all sorts of reasons. Maybe your file got transferred to a different office. Maybe there was a backlog at the National Benefits Center. Maybe your supporting documents needed additional review. Or maybe, as we are discussing today, there was a procedural change that temporarily slowed things down. Delays are frustrating, absolutely, but they are not the same as a denial. A denial is when USCIS makes a final decision that your petition does not meet the legal requirements, and they are refusing to approve it. Denials come with a written explanation, and you have the right to appeal or file a motion to reopen or reconsider depending on the circumstances. In most cases, if there is a problem with your petition, USCIS will send you a request for evidence, which we call an RFE, giving you a chance to provide additional documentation or clarification before they make a final decision. So if your case is delayed, please do not jump to the conclusion that it has been denied or that all hope is lost. The immigration system is slow, and it is structured, and sometimes it is maddeningly bureaucratic, but it is not random, and it does operate under legal principles that protect your right to due process. Now let me talk about who is most likely to be affected by this biometric speed-up update. In general, this is going to be most relevant to people who are filing new I-130 petitions or who are in the early stages of processing. If your petition was already approved months ago and you are now waiting for your priority date to become current so you can move forward with adjustment of status or consular processing, this update is probably not going to impact you at all. Similarly, if you filed your I-130 a long time ago and you have already gone through the biometric appointment and you are just waiting for the final approval, again, this change is not something you need to worry about. The people who might notice a difference are those who are filing right now in early 2026 or who filed recently and are still in that initial phase where USCIS is reviewing the petition and scheduling appointments. Even then, I want to emphasize that for the majority of you, this is going to feel like business as usual. You will get a notice in the mail or an update in your online account telling you when and where to go for your biometric appointment. You will show up, you will provide your fingerprints and photo, and then you will continue waiting for the next step, just like everyone else. What I do recommend, and this is practical guidance that applies to everyone regardless of whether or not you are affected by this particular update, is that you stay organized and patient throughout this process. Make sure that your address is always up to date with USCIS so that you do not miss any important notices. Check your online account regularly if you have one, but do not obsessively refresh the page every single day because that will only drive you crazy and it will not make your case move any faster. Keep copies of everything you have submitted, including your receipts, your forms, your supporting documents, and any correspondence you receive from USCIS. If you do get an RFE or a biometric appointment notice, respond promptly and follow the instructions carefully. And most importantly, try to manage your expectations about processing times. I know that USCIS publishes estimated processing times on their website, but those are just estimates, and in reality, many cases take longer than the published timeframe, especially right now when the agency is dealing with record-high numbers of applications and petitions across all categories. Backlogs are unfortunately very common, and long periods of silence where you hear nothing from USCIS are also completely normal, even though they are incredibly stressful. I also want to take a moment to talk about the emotional side of this journey, because I think that is something that does not get discussed enough in immigration videos. Waiting for a family petition to be approved is not just a bureaucratic inconvenience. It is deeply personal. You are waiting to be reunited with a spouse, a parent, a child, or a sibling. You are making plans for your future, and every day that goes by without an answer feels like your life is on hold. I understand that. And I want you to know that your feelings of frustration and anxiety are completely valid. The immigration system is not designed with compassion or urgency in mind, and that is a real problem, but it does not mean that you are powerless or that you should give up hope. Thousands of I-130 petitions are approved every single month, and there is no reason to believe that yours will not be one of them as long as you meet the legal requirements and you have submitted everything correctly. So to bring this all together and to summarize what we have talked about today, the new biometric speed-up rule for family petitions is not something you should be panicking about. It is a procedural update that USCIS is implementing with the goal of making the process more efficient. And while it might cause some temporary adjustments or slight changes in how and when biometric appointments are scheduled, it is not a red flag that indicates your case is in danger. For most of you watching, this will either have no impact at all, or it will actually help your case move a little bit faster. If you do experience a delay, remember that delays are not the same as denials, and that the system, as frustrating as it is, does provide you with protections and opportunities to respond if there is ever an issue. Stay organized, stay patient, and trust that as long as you have done everything correctly, your petition will eventually be adjudicated. I hope that this video has given you some clarity and peace of mind. I know that the immigration process can feel overwhelming, and I know that every new headline or rumor can send your stress levels through the roof, but I promise you that in most cases, the reality is far less dramatic than what is being portrayed online. You are not alone in this journey, and there are millions of families going through the exact same thing right now. If you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would share it with anyone else who might be worried about this topic. And please feel free to leave a comment below if you have any thoughts or if there are other immigration topics you would like me to cover in future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you all the very best with your cases.